Welcome to Roll Call with Columbus City Council. I am your host, Rolanda Hampton, and thank you for joining us. Roll Call is a look into the minds of former and current Columbus City Council members who impact the way we live in our city and the lessons learned in their journey of public service. During each episode, we'll feature past and present council members who have left a mark on the capital city. We will discuss the triumphs, missteps, and the legacy they hope to leave behind. First up on today's show is Shannon Hardin. Shannon is a lifelong resident of Columbus, and he joined Columbus City Council in October of 2014. Since then, he has worked to develop and implement numerous programs that have improved the quality of life in our neighborhoods, brought needed services to residents, and provided mentorship opportunities to the city's youth.
I've always had a pretty close connection to local government. My mom worked for Columbus City Council when I was a baby. As an assistant, she answered the phones. And so I was able to come and be a part of and see up close people that I really liked or respected. I didn't know what they did, but I remember seeing Cindy Lazarus and thinking, wow, this woman is president of something big or less right, and knowing that they were a part of something important. And so I've been around in that aspect and seen that and knew that these folks did something for our community that I love. At that time, I certainly wasn't interested in doing anything or following in their footsteps. I was just more interested in being in their little commercials or something, or engaging with them just one-on-one. But knowing that they had some sense of responsibility and being appreciative of that. When I was in high school, it was the 2004 presidential election. It was the day after the election. We came back to school. Many of us at Columbus Alternative High School had worked and worked on a progressive campaign for John Kerry for president. And it was after the Iraq War, and so we were wondering, how could we have not won this election? This is our first time really engaging in the political process, and we lost. And we didn't know why. But then we saw reports on TV that in Cleveland, folks stood in line for 10, 12, 14 hours to vote, some not even being able to vote. And that really troubled us. Our teacher came to us with a project, with a proposition, come up with a lasting solution to an issue. So, and her example was, if your issue is hunger, don't just have a food pantry, because that's not sustainable. That's not that's not a lasting effect. If you stop working on it today, it won't be around. So she said, come up with something that will have lasting effect. So myself and 5 other students from Columbus Alternative High School came up with this idea. Well, if there were long lines at the voting location, at the polls, and they said that for all different types of reasons, that they didn't have enough workers, that they didn't understand the machines. We're younger, we understand new technology. Why not allow us as young people to go and work the polls? That will give us, one, our first engagement with real democracy in action, but also help to solve a community-wide issue, which is getting folks through the polls quicker. And so we worked with a local group called Kids Voting in Central Ohio. We drafted a bill that would allow for high school seniors to have an excused day off on election day and to get paid to work at the polls as election workers, 17 and up. We went and then lobbied the Ohio State Legislature, and the person that we got to sponsor our bill, and she was not easy to get support from, was then Representative Joyce Beatty at the State House. And she said, go out, she said, I'll support your bill, but go out and get 100 signatures from other high school seniors to say that if they had this opportunity, they could, that they would take advantage of it. So we had to go out and do that. Well, we got our bill passed. We did the work, we got our bill passed. It took us an entire year. The first training of the Youth at the Booth program, that's what it's called, trained at Columbus Alternative High School. We had 20 of our classmates do the training. They went and worked that next election. Fast forwarding to today, there have been over 15,000 young people throughout the state of Ohio who have taken a part of our program that we created in Columbus Alternative High School. Never would I have known that we would have had that type of impact. But what that taught me is that a small group of people can make change if you work towards it. We have the best political environment where you can actually get things done. So we worked hard and we solved an issue. And so that's why I had chosen the political process as the way to affect change in our community. That was the first time that I was able to connect the pieces, that if you see an issue, if you can convince people that there's an issue, if you come up with a solution and then you work towards it, you can get something done. Shortly after Youth at the Booth, I began interning in then what was called the Mayor's Action Center, which is the precursor to the 311 call center. And that has still been my hook to why I do this and why I like community engagement, public service. I remember that you would get phone calls about trash pickup. The trash man skipped my house today, and I know that I'm gonna have to wait a whole week or whole 2 weeks to get my trash picked up, and I'm so angry. I can't believe this happened. Who can I talk to? I want to talk to the mayor about this. And I thought it was awesome to be able to solve that person's issue with a few phone calls, and then to click back over and say, ma'am, actually, I can help you with this. We'll have somebody out tomorrow to come pick up your trash. And in a 10-minute time frame, be able to change someone's whole disposition about the day was something that really pulled me to this work. I was then offered a job in Mayor Coleman's office as a community affairs coordinator. In the mayor's office, you have a 30,000-foot view of the city, and everything is bubbling up to the mayor's office. And so our job was to be visionary in the mayor's office, to see who was out there that is trying to create change and try to move our community forward. And really what I saw was, in this city of ours, Columbus, partnerships work. We're all in this together. And so that was probably the most impactful thing that I learned in the mayor's office, that you can get things done in our city. And I think that's been very helpful for me as a council member because now I'm one of 7. And so when I'm talking about the future of our city, when I'm trying to figure out how we increase transportation options, how we increase opportunities for young men of color, how we create a more diverse workforce and small business climate, it's really about working with my council members to come up with those solutions, because I know that they are just as passionate about those issues as I am, that they are so intelligent, so driven. They are Columbus-based, Columbus-driven, and so that all of us coming together will come up with a good solution. And so that's kind of what I learned, and that's how I've used it in my 3 years now on council. Very proud of President Obama for issuing the My Brother's Keepers Challenge to mayors at the time. But Mayor Coleman was just announced that he was not going to run for re-election. And so one of the things that he wanted was continuity in whatever we were doing as it pertained to young men of color. And so he asked me to come on as a co-chair. And so that winter, that December, we hosted a large forum at the King Arts Complex where we brought in all the community providers that work with young men of color. They outlined their issues. It was a real good coming together, alignment of community resources as it pertains to young men of color. The next step of becoming an MBK city, though, My Brother's Keeper City, was to create a task force. So the mayor and I initiated a task force in 2015. And so we brought in folks that represented all the different sectors. We went out and commissioned a report, but to get the report, we wanted to talk to the young men. So we met with 500 young men of color all around Columbus. We asked the young men, what are the barriers to your success? How can this city that loves you support you? And they gave us, they opened up, they talked to us. They told us about needing mentors. They told us about being bullied in school. They talked to us about needing and wanting a safe environment. And that meant having conversations with police and building police and community relations. And so they opened up, and we came up with the Youth Perspective Report of My Brother's Keeper in Columbus. We rolled that out in 2014. President Obama sent his director of My Brother's Keeper to Columbus to roll it out. And he did a rah, rah, rah on stage. He was so proud of us. Columbus is leading the way. And then we got off stage, and Director Johnson, Broderick Johnson, who was the president's MBK director, said, "Shannon, good work, but this does not have any metrics or goals in it." And he said, so if you're not going to give us data, and if you're not going to ask for the metrics, it won't go anywhere. And so that that really struck me. And so earlier this year, we commissioned the Kerwin Institute for the first time, to do some asset mapping. So first, find out where our resources are, who out in the community is really doing the work of moving our young men forward. Come up with some metrics that we can then hold ourselves accountable for to get to our overall goals. So for instance, by 2025, how many young men of color do we want to have passing the third grade reading test? By 2025, how many young men of color do we want to have mentors for? By 2025, how many young men of color do we want to reduce the number of incarcerations or deaths? I don't think it's a black issue. I don't think it's a brown issue. I think it's a community issue. I think it's a Columbus issue. So we're slowly but surely marching towards goals that will make our community really, as Americans say, the opportunity city for all. Columbus makes a difference to me because we are our brother's keeper. We are our sister's keeper. We take care of one another, we stack hands with one another, and we solve issues for each other. That's why Columbus matters to us.
Next up, we'll be talking to Mitchell Brown. Mitch joined Columbus City Council in 2016. Before then, he was a paramedic in the city of Philadelphia, followed by stints as the director of Cleveland's and Columbus's public safety departments. He has a strong safety background and plans to use his knowledge and experience to continue making Columbus a great place to live.
Growing up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, it was really, really special. And I didn't have any impression at all about city government other than the police officers. But I had a great time growing up in Pittsburgh. It was very, very interesting because it was communities within the city. We lived in public housing, and friends of mine who I've known since I was a little kid, and we still communicate, and we all talk very, very affectionately about Pittsburgh. And they've gotten involved in all sorts of other endeavors, professors and some individuals who became firefighters. We never ever thought about that when we were growing up. We just thought, hey, we just want to grow up, and now we have, and it's a whole different mindset. Involved in emergency medicine, and that was primarily through the military more than anything else. I was a medic in the Air Force and served during the Vietnam War. I didn't go to Vietnam, but upon returning to Pittsburgh after serving in the Air Force, I saw these beige ambulances. And they had ambulance on the side, and it wasn't EMS back then. It was just an ambulance service, and I didn't know what that was all about. And so I had the opportunity to go over to the University of Pittsburgh, and I sat outside of Dr. Saffer's office, and Peter was just a spectacular human being. He was a physician at the university and chairman of the Department of Anesthesiology, and waited till he came out and introduced myself and said, I understand you're the guy that's in charge of this program. I don't know who you have working there, but you don't have anybody better than me. And we developed a friendship and a relationship, and it grew into taking care of people in the community, which is what Freedom House was really all about, long before people had any clue about emergency medical services. I think the issue about public service is being able to help others more than anything else, and I guess that's always been part of my DNA, again from my old days as being an EMT and a medic. When you can help others, there's no more satisfying activity, and doing for them what they can't necessarily do for themselves and helping them to improve their lot in life. I've been very blessed in a lot of ways. So being able to give back is very, very important to me. And being able to be a good problem solver is very, very special. When I first got involved in my political life, or public life, if you will, I met George Voinovich and I met George Forbes. George Forbes was the council president and George Voinovich was the mayor. Voinovich had recruited me from the University of Pittsburgh. And the two of them were so diametrically opposed in circumstances. One was a Republican, one was a Democrat. And yet the objective was, how do we make the city of Cleveland better? The city was under default at the time, and I learned from watching both of them how really important it is to work with someone. You can disagree, but disagree agreeably, and be straightforward and always maintain your integrity. You can't compromise that. And I learned that from watching those two since we're getting things done, and it's what I always try to do. I had the opportunity to meet with Senator John Glenn under what was perceived to be somewhat adverse circumstances. I had to go and do a presentation before the Ohio delegation, and a number of the elected officials were giving me a really difficult time, and it wasn't anything that I had done, it was the circumstance that I was representing. And I'll never forget that when the session was all over, everyone left and it was in John Glenn's office. And he came up to me and said, "I thought you did a really fine job." And he said, "But the media's waiting for you." And he said, "And they're gonna really try and tear you apart." And I said, "Let me call my boss." I called then Mayor George Voinovich and told him what the circumstances were. And he said, "Whatever you want to do, however you want to handle it." Senator Glenn offered me an opportunity to go out the side door. I could have avoided the media. After I got off the phone, I went back to the senator and I said, "Senator, I've never walked out the back door in my life. I got to go out the front door and I'll deal with it." And Senator Glenn said, "I'll go with you. I'll handle the media. You handle the operational questions." You learn from people like that on being kind and being nice to everyone. There's never an excuse for not being nice to people. Well, it was very, very special because it was a time when the police division was questioned by the Department of Justice as to whether or not they were not treating citizens properly. I came in, and one of the things that I developed was a set of core values for the police division. Those values are professionalism, respect, integrity, discipline, enthusiasm, a sense of urgency, and attention to detail. And every officer who came in, new officer, had to learn all those core values. And working with the police division to enhance their ability to communicate with the community. We still get issues with that. That was in the police division, and giving them the tools to do the jobs that they need to do. In the fire division, it was obviously my history with emergency medical services. A number of people in the fire division knew my background and knew how strongly I felt about how you take care of your citizenry. When they have problems and you take the care to them rather than taking them to the care. Initiate it in their home, initiate it where they're having a problem. And they do that very, very well. And getting both divisions, police and fire, to be accredited. The fire division to have international accreditation, meaning that they meet all the criteria for an assessment of their capabilities to fight fires, to deal with EMS. And in the police division, it was CALEA, the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. Again, making sure they're doing all the paperwork, all the detail work, and doing that very, very well. So those were really special to me, and I had a good time doing that. What, for me, serving on council is realizing that through the legislative process, the impact you can make on improving the communities that we have an obligation to be responsive to. And I've learned that by watching my colleagues and the folks who've already done this job and learning from them on how to get things accomplished. And our city is growing, our city is changing and expanding, so the capabilities of law enforcement and firefighting is around the area of using technology to improve the way in which we can deliver services. Certainly with the population growing the way it is, we need more police officers, and certainly we're expanding with our fire division. But how you go about it, firefighters used to have to worry about getting back injuries because of carrying people. Now we have different types of stretchers that help minimize the injuries to them. But we have other issues associated with cancer or carcinogens that they're exposed to when they're in a fire, and how do we minimize that circumstance and be more aware of it. Our police officers, again, are confronted with all kinds of circumstances, so body-worn cameras will be a benefit. But not only that, it's the time they spend inside the automobiles and having the type of computer technology inside the car to help them be able to recognize and deal with problems as they're confronted with it. So all of that is special. Life lessons are always very complicated from the standpoint of what I've learned growing up. And probably the most significant lesson, or one of the significant lessons, is that you spend the time and effort on the job you're doing. Don't worry about the next job. Be really good at what it is you're doing and learn as much about it as you possibly can. There are going to be other opportunities that are going to come along. But you can only look back on those. I said I can look back on when I was a medic and it was a lot of fun. But it's different than the things I do now. And learning how, and this is something that I was taught, or someone taught me, if you adjust your expectations about people, but keep your standards high. Columbus makes a difference because it's a nice place to grow up. It's a nice place for children. It's a nice place for families. The people are kind, the people are nice, and we try to help each other. It's a unique scenario where you can go into a community and not know anyone, and yet they'll extend a helping hand for circumstances that you're being confronted with. And that's part of what council has to do. We lend a helping hand to all the citizens when they have potential problems.
That's it for today's show. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to give us a call at 614-645-7380 or go to the web www.columbus.gov/council. I'm Rolanda Hampton, and thank you for watching.